What makes me a liberal, what makes my colleagues liberals, is an unwavering belief that an economy is only strong when it serves everyone. Because in society, people can slip through the cracks. They can be left behind. And that was the reality for far too many Canadians, even before President Trump's tariffs. And now, because of them, many more Canadians are at risk. President Trump is in the process of trying to fundamentally restructure the U.S. economy, and that means that our economy here needs to change dramatically as well. And as I made clear to President Trump in our call last week, I will reject all attempts to weaken Canada, all attempts to wear us down, to break us down so that America can own us. That will never, ever happen.
It could be a case of 11th hour indecision in Washington right now.
Yeah, the White House is ground zero in an escalating trade war that threatens to further fracture America's alliances and upend the global economic order. Less than 24 hours from now, we're expecting President Trump to spell out his most aggressive tariffs yet.
On Wednesday, it will be Liberation Day in America, as President Trump has so proudly dubbed it. The president will be announcing a tariff plan that will roll back the unfair trade practices that have been ripping off our country for decades. He's doing this in the best interest of the American worker.
The details of that plan remain unclear, and we still don't know if the levies will involve America's largest trading partners, the entire world, or something in between. One senior advisor says the president himself may actually not have even decided yet and could make up his mind just hours before the announcement itself. What is clear is the deepening sense of betrayal felt among America's allies.
Yeah, the head of the European Commission is warning the White House that the EU has a strong plan to retaliate and will use it if needed. And here's a look at what the markets are doing ahead of the big announcement. The Dow down by just 53 points, less than a percentage point there. The NASDAQ and S&P slightly up, but of course this coming after a dizzying sell-off over the last 6 weeks. The stock market, the S&P 500, having really their worst quarter in a number of years now.
Yeah, the market's clearly in a wait-and-see mode before the announcements this week. Let's bring in CNN's Matt Egan, who's joining us live now from New York. But first, I want to go to Kevin Liptak, joining us from Washington. So, Kevin, as I was just mentioning there's still so much uncertainty in terms of what we know. We don't necessarily know how many countries are going to be affected. We don't know which countries are necessarily going to be affected. We don't even know the tariff rate that these countries are going to have to deal with. Just walk us through what we actually do know for sure at this point in time. We're hearing that the president himself might not even have made up his mind.
Yeah, about the only thing we know for sure is where this announcement is happening, which is in the Rose Garden. And actually, we just got a little advisory. It's going to happen at 4 p.m. But beyond that, the specifics and the contours of what the president is actually intending to announce in the Rose Garden remain entirely unclear. We heard him last night in the Oval Office say that he had, in fact, settled on a plan, but that was a surprise to a lot of his own advisors. This plan has not been circulated widely inside the building. What we do know is that a number of the president's economic advisors have been coming up with their own proposals and plans for the president to look at, whether it's Peter Navarro, the hawkish trade advisor, whether it's Kevin Hassett, who is the chief economist and is seen as something of a more skeptic when it comes to tariffs. They have all sort of combined to come up with their own ideas that the president is assessing. We know that one of the options that has been drafted is this universal tariff, perhaps as high as 20% on all American trading partners. That would be on the most extreme end of what the president could do. And I think the issue that some of his team have with this plan is it doesn't necessarily leave a lot of space for negotiation with these other countries. You know, you can't negotiate with the entire world. And that's why some of the other plans that have been raised are these more dollar-for-dollar tariffs, essentially a true reciprocal tariff. If a country has a duty on an American product, that the President Trump would apply a similar duty to those countries that are importing their items into the United States. And so it doesn't remain exactly clear. What also isn't clear is whether the president will be dealing with trading blocs as a whole, like the European Union, or whether he'll target individual countries within those blocs. So just a whole lot of uncertainty a day before the president plans to come out and make this plan. I think one of the items that is on the president's list to decide and will depend on what he ends up deciding to do is how much revenue he can expect to bring in as part of these tariffs. Because, we talk about these tariffs as a negotiating tool, as a way to realign global trade. But they're also sort of essential to the president's entire agenda if he hopes to offset the cost of the tax cuts that he hopes to sign later this year. A tariff, a 20% tariff on all countries importing items into the United States would raise an enormous amount of revenue, potentially as much as $6 trillion over the course of the decade, which is a figure that Peter Navarro raised over the weekend. If he puts into place individual rates on countries with the hopes that that could be negotiated down, that's a far less fixed point of revenue for the president to rely upon for the rest of his agenda. So that's all something that the president will have to consider as he nears this final decision sometime before 4 p.m. tomorrow.
Yeah, and that $6 trillion figure, you're right to point out, would only be accurate if those tariffs stay in place, which would have no doubt a crippling effect on the economy, and not to mention the retaliatory tariffs that would likely come in response. I just couldn't imagine that being in place for such a long period of time without them being renegotiated. Kevin Liptak, thank you so much. Matt Egan, we do want to go back to you. As we noted, the S&P 500 experiencing its worst one-month loss since 2022. The market's taking a bit of a breather now, perhaps not knowing, like all of us, just what to expect tomorrow and whether or not there's a glimmer of hope that the president could walk back some of these tariffs. But talk to us about the uncertainty that Wall Street is now has been experiencing for the past 2 months since this administration first set out these tariffs.
Yeah, Bianna, I can't recall a time where there was this much anxiety about a policy announcement coming out of the White House. And yet, 24 hours or so beforehand, there's this little clarity about what that policy announcement is going to look like. And it can be a little confusing to our viewers because there's so many different tariff proposals that are out there that have been floated, so many different things that the president has already done. But what's really important to stress is that President Trump is using tariffs much more aggressively than he did during his first term, right? Through his first 4 years in the White House, he put tariffs on almost $400 billion of U.S. imports, and we're only about 2 months into Trump 2.0, and he's already doubled that, right? About $1 trillion of U.S. imports face tariffs. Now, if the more extreme of those proposals that Kevin was discussing, these universal tariffs went into place, then we're talking about tariffs on $3+ trillion of U.S. imports. And I just talked to Moody's economist Mark Zandi, and he told me, look, that is the worst case scenario. He said if that happened, he said we would get a serious recession, and it's a wipeout for the economy. Moody's did a simulation and said, okay, well, what if there's this 20% universal tariff and other countries fully retaliate? Well, they find that the U.S. economy would lose 5.5 million jobs. The unemployment rate would spike to 7%. GDP would fall. And really, the whole world economy would stumble into a downturn. So hopefully that is not what happens, of course. And Zandi pointed out that the results would be so extreme for the economy that's why he doesn't think it'll happen, and that Trump does have this history of making these threats and then walking back. But you can see Goldman Sachs has already moved to slash its economic outlook, right? They've downgraded U.S. GDP forecast. They're warning of higher inflation, higher unemployment, and they now see a 35% chance of a recession, all because the president has used tariffs much more aggressively, not only than during the first term, but much more aggressively, frankly, than a lot of investors, CEOs, and economists had anticipated. And this is just causing so many question marks and uncertainties for business leaders. The Dallas Fed interviewed manufacturing executives, and one of them said that this is just truly ridiculous when it comes to all of this tariff uncertainty. This executive said, I've been in business for 50 years as of next year, and never have I seen such uncertainty in the market. So, Zandi, Bianna, look, everyone is just hoping that we get more clarity by tomorrow afternoon about exactly where tariffs are going, on which countries, and for how long they're going to stay in place.
So much uncertainty, and we should note self-inflicted. I mean, all of this
Totally.
is self-inflicted. Kevin Liptak, Matt Egan, thank you so much.